Trigger warning, this video contains references to things that may be disturbing to some listeners and viewers. Please use discretion. She was a typical teenage girl living in a beautiful home in an affluent area in Utah. She didn't have a high-risk lifestyle, no boyfriends, no drug use, no undesirable friends, etc. Then, on June 5, 2002, her life was disrupted when a strange man entered her bedroom and threatened to kill her if she screamed. She was abducted at knife point and taken from her home. Of course, I'm talking about Elizabeth Smart, the girl who was kidnapped, assaulted, and held prisoner for months as she, her abductor, and his wife camped out in remote woodlands not far from Salt Lake City, Utah. Hi, I'm Tamworth Grice. Welcome to my channel, the Tamworth Grice Files. Here you will find stories that are strange, spooky, macabre, and just plain weird. And in each case, I have a connection to the story, so be sure you stick around to hear about that. Also, please subscribe. Born in 1987, Elizabeth Smart was 14 at the time of the kidnapping. Before her abduction, Elizabeth had been very committed to playing the harp, and her music teacher told the family Elizabeth would get through whatever she had to endure. The teacher had seen how hard she worked and how intelligent she was. To the harp teacher, this was evidence of Elizabeth's strong character. Her kidnapper was a schizophrenic religious fanatic named Brian David Mitchell. Mitchell and his wife, Wanda Barzee, held Smart captive for 9 months. Mitchell was a homeless street preacher who exhibited delusions, heard voices, and thought he was an angel. He later claimed that he was acting on orders from God when he kidnapped Elizabeth. He threatened to kill her family and abduct her little sister and her cousin. These threats helped bring about compliance in Elizabeth. Mitchell, who kept the girl chained by her ankle, repeatedly assaulted her, starved her, fed her garbage, forced her to look at pornography, and made her use drugs and drink alcohol to the point of vomiting. Mitchell repeatedly told Smart that she was blessed and that this was happening to her because she had been chosen as his bride and should be thankful. Throughout the ordeal, the couple attempted to brainwash her into sharing their strange beliefs, but Elizabeth had been raised as a Mormon and was very religious. Nevertheless, even though she didn't buy into the belief, she went along with the crazy ideas whenever she had to, just to stay alive. Mitchell had a history of sexual misconduct, having exposed himself as a teenager, and of wife-beating as an adult. In addition, his former wife claimed that he had abused their 3-year-old son and his wife's daughter from a previous marriage. His last wife, Wanda Barzee, whom Elizabeth would later call the most evil woman she had ever met, and who was the other one of her captors, was referred to by one of her own daughters as a monster. Mitchell and Barzee were known to panhandle and preach on the streets of Salt Lake City. Here Mitchell met the Smart family, and the father hired Mitchell to do some work at his home. This meant Mitchell became familiar with the layout of the house and with the fact that the family included a 14-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. After kidnapping her, Mitchell took her to a campsite far up in the woods 4 miles behind their house. Flyers were distributed, and thousands of people, as well as dogs and helicopters, searched for her. At one point, she could even hear them calling her name, but of course she was afraid to respond for fear of what her captors would do to her. In addition, Mitchell had threatened to kill her family if she cried out. Elizabeth was so innocent and religious at the time of her abduction that she had never even held a boy's hand. Almost as soon as they got to the camp, Mitchell assaulted her. Occasionally, the three ventured into cities where her captors usually forced Elizabeth to wear a long robe, a headscarf, and a face covering, so that the only part of her that showed was her eyes and she wouldn't be recognized. Eventually, the kidnapper was identified as Brian David Mitchell, and photos of him were circulated via flyers and the media. On March 12, 2003, 9 months after she was captured, Mitchell was spotted with a woman and a girl in Sandy, Utah, by two separate couples who had seen photos of Mitchell on the news. The police department immediately dispatched police officers to the location. The officers separated the three on site for questioning. At first, out of fear because her captors were just a few feet away, Elizabeth refused to acknowledge who she was. Wanda Barzee showed an angry expression as she furiously clutched at Elizabeth's sleeve when police tried to separate them. Finally, when an officer asked again, "Are you Elizabeth?" she replied, "Thou sayest." And at last she was rescued. Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison. Now for my connection to the story. When I was 12 years old, my mother had died and my father was at work, so I was alone in the house with a man who was doing some kind of labor in our basement. I lived in a nice neighborhood in the Midwest and was very naive, especially compared to 12-year-olds today. At one point, the man, who seemed to be in his 20s, came upstairs and prepared to leave. I was sitting at the kitchen table reading a book about woodland animals. He saw the book and he asked me if I would like to go into the woods with him. He took me by my shoulders and slowly lifted me out of the chair. Then he held my hand and looked deeply into my eyes. He said that in the nearby woods we could look for animals. He promised me we would see a deer and said he knew exactly where to find them. He told me we needed to leave right away or the deer would be gone when we got there. This was appealing because I'd never seen a deer, but nonetheless I told him I couldn't leave right away because I was only 12 years old and I would have to ask my father. He gave me a strange look and then said, "Oh, I thought you were 21. As an adolescent who wanted to be grown up, I felt thrilled to think that I could be mistaken for 21. In retrospect, however, I realized this was his defense. If I told anybody about how he tried to get me to go to the woods with him, he could claim he thought I was older. But I didn't wear makeup, I didn't style my hair in a teenage or adult way, and there was no way he really thought I was 21. Anyway, he left our house almost immediately and never returned. I didn't tell any of my friends about the incident for fear they'd laugh at me. My father was very strict and I was afraid to tell him about the encounter because I thought I might get blamed for it or get in trouble. But now I know this would not have happened. My father worked very hard to protect me. I was too young to sense the danger I would have been in if I had gone into the woods with this strange man. But obviously he was up to no good. I mean, what stranger wants to go with a child alone into the woods unless he has something nefarious in mind? In retrospect, I feel guilty about never telling anyone because perhaps he later harmed another child and I could have prevented that. But it is what it is, and there is nothing I can do about it now. I'm just telling the story to give a sense of how I feel a very minor kinship with Elizabeth Smart, thinking about what might have happened to me, as well as about the tragedy of what happened to her. Before I end this, I want to say that I have the highest respect for Elizabeth Smart. Frankly, if I had gone through her ordeal, I would never want to talk about it again, and I would probably have changed my name and moved someplace where no one would ever find me because of the trauma I had endured. But Elizabeth didn't do that. She faced her situation and turned it into a way to help others. She became a leading advocate for children who were kidnapped and for those who endured sexual abuse. Today, Elizabeth is married and lives a normal life with her husband and 3 children in Utah. Her Elizabeth Smart Foundation continues to strive for social change and advocate for survivors in the fight against sexual violence. So, what do you think? Whether you're male or female, did you ever have any close calls with abduction or sexual abuse like I did as a child? Did you tell anyone about it? If not, why? If you didn't, as you look back, do you wish you had shared the experience? Let me know in the comments. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual abuse, information and resources are available at www.wannatalkaboutit.com. Thank you for watching. If you found the story compelling, please subscribe because I really need subscribers. This is Tamworth Grace signing off. Until next time, stay wonderful, stay weird, and have beautiful dreams.